Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another special meeting of the Malden School Committee, where tonight we will interview Laurie Gallivan for the position of Superintendent of Schools. Today is Wednesday, March 10th, 2021, and the time is 6:05 p.m. So we also are joined by Maria Luis, who will be clerking this evening's meeting. So if you have any questions after, she would love to hear from you. And we also want to, as we always do, make sure that we start our meeting by pledging allegiance to our flag. We will then have a moment of silence for all those who have served our country and continue to do so today. Then our clerk will call the roll to ensure that we have a quorum sufficient to meet this evening. And then we will get into this evening's agenda, which again involves the interview of Laurie Gallivan for the position of Superintendent of Schools. We also, before we formally begin, we'll hear from Danielle of Rosetta Languages, who is going to be spearheading our interpretation services for tonight. So if there are no questions, why don't we first pledge allegiance to our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence in honor of all those who have fought for our country and continue to protect us today. Thank you. Let's have our clerk call the roll.
Rummy?
Here.
Mr. Froio?
It's on mute.
Mr. Froyo.
Yeah.
You, John. Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Iavino?
Here.
Ms. Luong is absent. Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
Ms. Spatafora?
Here.
Mr. Weldy?
Here.
Mayor Christensen?
Here. So we have a quorum sufficient to meet this evening. Let's make sure we also tell everyone tonight that in accordance with Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, as well as the Governor's August 23rd and December 8th, 2020 revised guidance prohibiting assemblage of more than 25 people, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation. In-person attendance by members of the public is prohibited, but all effort will be made to permit public attendance of this meeting via remote access by internet, telephone, and via public broadcast of the meeting by MATV/Urban Media Arts on public access television channels. Public access is also going to be provided by posting draft minutes and/or a transcript, recording, or record of the meeting on the City of Malden website at cityofmalden.org as soon as practical after this meeting. So let's go to Danielle, who's going to talk about how the function of interpretation will happen tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Gary. Good evening, everyone. This is Danielle here with the team of interpreters from Rosetta Languages. We'll be interpreting into 7 languages, and we're just going to give a brief intro in each language so that folks know how to get on the language channel. I will start with Arabic. السلام عليكم، مساء الخير. عندنا ترجمة باللغة العربية لهذا الاجتماع. اضغط على رمز الكرة الأرضية واختر اللغة العربية. إذا كنت على هاتف محمول اضغط على 3 نقط وبعد ذلك على اللغة العربية وبعد ذلك على تم. شكرا جزيلا. Spanish will be next.
Buenas noches todo el mundo. Hoy tenemos interpretación en español. Si usted se está conectando tras su computadora, puede ir al fondo de la pantalla cuando abrimos la función y va a haber un globo. Puede empujar ahí, hacer clic y escoger Spanish. Y si se están conectando tras su teléfono, por favor empuje los 3 punticos y de ahí escoge Spanish. Gracias. I pass it to Portuguese.
Olá, boa noite. Hoje à noite temos interpretação em português. Quando ativamos a função de interpretação, você vai ver um globo na parte de baixo da sua tela. Por favor, pressione esse globo e escolhe português. Se você estiver participando através de um celular, vai ver 3 bolinhas na parte de baixo da sua tela. Escolhe interpretação e depois escolhe português. Obrigada. I'm going to pass it to Haitian Creole.
Bonsoir, nom c'est Nikita Lamo, c'est n'a interprété à soi en 7 langues, donc moi m'a interprété en créole. Les nous en signe nous parle de fonction pour interprétation. Les nous signe là, si nous l'ordinateur n'a pas un globe, n'a pas appendre nous signe en Haitian Creole, c'est Haitian Creole la paquet, n'a cliqué sur Haitian Creole là. Si nous l'on téléphone cellulaire, on a pour 3 points, 3 petits points yo, après ça n'a mettez n'a cliqué Haitian Creole et fini n'a mettez done. Donc c'est comme ça nous pas le faire en interprétation à soi. So I'm going to pass it to Vietnamese.
Xin chào quý vị, tên tôi là Phương và tôi sẽ là người thông dịch cho tiếng Việt. Quý vị có thể lắng nghe buổi họp mặt này bằng tiếng Việt bằng cách tham dự vào kênh thông dịch. Thêm vài phút nữa chúng tôi sẽ mở kênh và quý vị sẽ thấy một hình tượng quả địa cầu hiện lên trên màn hình của quý vị. Nhấn vào quả địa cầu và chọn tiếng Việt. Nếu quý vị đang dùng phone thông minh, nhấn vào 3 dấu chấm để lựa chọn thêm, lựa phiên dịch ngôn ngữ, rồi lựa tiếng Việt, rồi sau đó bấm làm xong. Nếu có khó khăn gì, xin vui lòng lên tiếng hoặc viết vô trong khung chat và chúng tôi sẽ giúp quý vị. And now I'll pass it to Mandarin.
大家好，我的名字叫 Terry， 我今天会给大家做这个国语的翻译哈。待会儿呢，都过几分钟以后，你就会在屏幕下方看到一个地球的按钮，你点一下这个地球的按钮，在上面选择 Mandarin， 就可以听到我的国语的翻译了。如果你用手机或者是或者是 iPad 上的话呢，你可以选择3个点，然后再选择更多，然后选择语言选项，然后你就可以选择 Mandarin， 可以听到国语的翻译了。如果有任何的问题呢，你可以在这里留言，我们可以帮您。谢謝你。I'll pass it to Anna Cantonese, please.
大家好，我係 Anna， 我係來自 Rosetta 語言嘅團隊，今晚為你哋提供7種唔同嘅同步翻譯。如果你想聽到廣東話翻譯嘅話，咁你就去到地球儀個圖標，撳嗰個圖標揀 Cantonese， 咁你就會聽到廣東話同步翻譯噶啦。多謝大家 ，Thank you. I'll pass it back to Danielle.
Thank you. Interpreters, please make sure you are not on mute and that your microphone is on. And host, you may go ahead and activate the interpretation channels.
All right, they are activated.
All right, I have to say, this is becoming my favorite part of the meetings. So as they say in Mandarin, Ni Hun Yu, which I hope means you are awesome. All right, so why don't we do this? Let's do introductions of the members to our candidate. So I'll begin. I'm Gary Christensen, Mayor of the City of Malden and also Chairperson of the Malden School Committee. Also a graduate of the Malden Public Schools, graduating in, well, I'm not going to say the year anymore, but graduated from Malden High School. And I'm the proud brother of a Malden Public Schools teacher, so watch out. Now let's go to, very nice to meet you. Let's go to Ward 1. We have Mr. Drummy representing that area.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Ms. Gallivan. How are you tonight?
I'm
My
well,
name is
thank
Mike
you.
Drummy. I'm the Ward 1 School Committee member. I've been here about 6 years now on the committee. My wife, like Gary, is a para at the Ferryway School. And Lexington, I want to say, and Winchester is my youngest daughter. But we don't hold that against her. But that's about it. But welcome and good luck.
Thank you.
All right, now representing Ward 2, Rob McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Nice to see you, Mrs. Gallivan. My name is Rob McCarthy. I'm the Ward 2 School Committee member. I've been on the committee for about 4 years now. I had a sister that was a paraprofessional at one of the schools. I had a parent that was an educator here in Malden for 35 years. So I look forward to your interview tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Now from Ward 3, who needs no introduction, Ms. Gallivan, we have Jennifer Spatafora.
Hi, Ms. Gallivan. It's good to see you again. reintroduce myself. I'm Jennifer Spadafora, Ward 3 School Committee Representative. I'm the parent of 3 children, one that is a graduate of the district, 2 that are currently in district. I have a background in finance, and I sit as the chair of the budget subcommittee, also the chair as our social, emotional, and physical well-being subcommittee, and I'm the liaison to the Malden CPAC.
Thank you.
Very good. Now over to Ward 4, Mr. Lenny Iavino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Laurie, to the Malden interview for the Superintendency of the Malden Public Schools. My name is Len Iavino. I represent Ward 4 in the Malden School Committee. I'm also vice chair of the school committee, and I am a veteran teacher and administrator in Malden. My late wife also taught English for 35 years here in the system, and my sister before that had 36 years into the Malden Public School as an English teacher at Malden High School. So welcome, and I look forward to your interview.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up, another person who's helped get us here this evening, and that's Mr. Adam Weldi representing Ward 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hi again, Ms. Gallivan. It's great to see you. I'm Adam Weldi from Ward 5. I'm an educator myself in one of our 5 DP districts, a graduate of the Malden Public Schools, and a proud son of a Malden Public Schools teacher. So I look forward to hearing more from you tonight.
All right, now we'll go over to Ward 6, where we're represented by Joe Gray.
Good evening, Mrs. Gallivan. My name is Joe Gray. I represent Ward 6, and I pretty much enjoy listening to all types of related technology reports.
Very good.
Good to know. Thank you.
And as we mentioned before, Ms. Luong could not attend this evening, but she'll be watching and she'll definitely look at the recording after. So we do want to acknowledge her. She's just as involved as we all are. So next up, we'll go over to Ward 8, where we'll hear from Mr. John Froyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. My name is John Froyle. I'm a Ward 8 school committee member, also a retired Malden High School teacher, and I've lived in Malden most of my life. And I've been on the school committee 13 years.
Wow. That's great. Nice to meet you.
All right, so Ms. Galvin, the floor is yours, and we're going to turn it over to you for a brief introduction. And if you could include in your introduction, why Malden, why now?
Great. Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you. It's really great to have a committee that is so full of either past educators and or has ties to education via parents or family members. It's really nice to see that. But I really do want to thank all of you for the opportunity to meet with you again. I want to thank the search committee for seeing the potential to put me through to this level, and to all the folks that were willing and the students that were willing to come out during the forums to give me a real, I believe, open, honest insight into the Malden Public Schools as a district and as a community. Just a little bit of background on me. I know a lot of you may have read in my resume, but I started teaching about 26 years ago in Springfield at a secure DYS facility. I spent 2 years there and was then recruited to come to the city of Lynn, to Marshall Middle School. The principal there was starting an alternative 8th grade program at the time, and he tagged myself and 3 others to make this come to life and make it happen. And I really valued my time there. It was my first insight into the practice of restorative justice and public school discipline. I really think that it's a powerful option that we should continue to explore in more detail. I later moved to the alternative high school in Lynn. It at the time was called the Career Development Center. Now it is known as the Fecto Leary Junior Senior High School. Still a very active program. And there I completed my administrative practicum. I split my time at both the Marshall Middle School and the alternative high school to do my practicum at both levels. And later was able to step in as acting principal when the principal was out. There were a lot of opportunities. There were not a lot of opportunities in the city for me at the time. And I was offered a position in Newburyport at the Knock Middle School as the assistant principal. I went there for a couple of years and later became the principal of their upper elementary school. And At the time, we were in a total transition to full inclusion in the district. And I had the privilege really of working with our consultant, Dr. Susan Craig. She's a specialist in integrated therapies. And she had a real focus on early trauma and its effects on student learning. And it gave me a really new appreciation for the work that's necessary to allow us to keep students in district with their peers whenever possible. And one of the things that I took away from that time that has stayed with me all these years. And I just want to add that during my 4 years in Newburyport, I worked with 3 different superintendents in those 4 years. And then I later went to Saugus, where I was a principal again for 3 years and then moved into the role that I have now for 4 years of Executive Director of Curriculum Instruction and Accountability. And during my 7 years total in Saugus, I worked under 5 different superintendents. So I learned very quickly, that the position of superintendent is not a job, really. It's a responsibility. And I know that as a leader, I know that you have the ability to affect real change and systematic change, but you have to stick around to see it happen. And I know that I need to find a district that's looking for someone who's in it for the long haul. So I've been in this role as assistant superintendent on the North Shore for about 7 years. I know and understand all facets of district leadership. But if this pandemic has really taught me anything, it's that there's always more to learn. We learned so much over this past year, and I'm really ready to be the lead learner for Malden, if you'll have me. So thank you again for the time today.
All right, very good. All right, so what we're going to do now is each member is going to ask you one question, and then we'll open it up for clarification on any of those questions or anything else that was missed as we go around. Okay,
Great.
and then we'll let you close us out once we get past that. All right, so the first question I'll ask, which has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. What does that mean to you? How do you see it in your role as superintendent here in the Malden Public Schools?
Well, first I'll start by saying, I think it means everything. I obviously would need to have more discussion and do more listening to better understand clearly the needs of Malden. But I know that you just hired a new director for the city. So I would say that I would start with connecting with Director La Rochelle, I believe it is, and start the conversation about.
Now that's a good answer. She's on the call tonight, so.
Well, nice to meet you, Director. But I would start with a call to her really to find out, how do we move Malden forward together? And how do we build a position like hers in our public schools, which I know, Mayor, you've mentioned before in the past, but if we are going to make sure that our values are really reflected and represented by our actions, then I believe that that's one thing that has to happen very quickly. And I believe that the work has to be embedded in everything that we do. It's not something that you can just hit a couple times a year in a professional development day for teachers. I think that would be a better use of that time would be in helping to provide teachers and staff with strong cultural proficiency trainings to better understand the students that they're serving that are in front of them. But this was one of the main reasons that when I originally started looking at the position in Malden, that I was really attracted to it. The position that you've taken as a city, that the students have taken, and the community and the teachers in declaring racism a public health emergency crisis and making Juneteenth a city holiday, the entire Unite Malden 2020 initiative is very inspiring. And I've started a lot of work with our team in Winthrop. We work with an outside consultant who is, after we started working with her, became the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the Newton Public Schools, but she still has a consulting agency that she works with us continually. And we've really started looking at, actually today, we had a professional development today. So we took the next steps of working with teachers to start to understand themselves as an individual. We're asking them to take their teacher hats off and to look deep at who we are as individuals and as team members. So we've begun our next steps of looking at and having conversations around racial identity development, which is really powerful, but very hard work. So I would plan, again, to connect with Director La Rochelle and build from there moving forward together to connect the work that we're doing in the schools with the work being done with the families and the rest of the Malden community.
Very good. Mr. Welder, may I ask, can you ask Danielle, are we at a good pace? Or does he need us to slow down? Just let me know, okay? Okay.
You got it. He can hear, they can hear it, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Now let's go to Mr. Drummy. I think you're on mute, Mr. Drummy.
Doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Ms. Galvin, it's a three-part question. What do you expect your priorities to be your first year, then your third through fifth year, and how would you go about implementing and devising your objectives, and how would you get your top staff to go along and support them?
Okay, so first year, then third through fifth year?
First year, third through five, and then how would you get your leadership team to support what you're doing?
So, so my top priorities for year one would be to listen and learn as much as I can, at least in the first 6 months or so, to visit and work with as many community members, stakeholders, to really get to know and understand what are the things that need the most attention right off the bat, and what things are the untouchables that everybody is so committed to and so proud of that we need to make sure that they don't change, right? And I would also have to look at, I know that you're in the final development stages of a new strategic plan, and I would want to make sure that the various stakeholders are able to get together to review that plan. And given that time that we're in and this pandemic, we want to make sure that we're ready to proceed, right, with where the plan has been, where it was when it was developed. Then I would design my entry plan accordingly and present to the school committee and the community an outline of a collective focus moving forward. In this plan, I would expect there'd be some focus goals and assessments around addressing the learning gaps that we know that are unfortunately only have been widened by this pandemic. I would anticipate the need to focus on assisting classroom teachers and administrators to strengthen our tier 1 instruction, because it's going to look different next year than it would on any normal year. And maybe for a year or two after, but I guess then looking forward to a third 3 through 5 year plan would include some of the long-term goals and expectations that are in the strategic plan. And this would involve making sure that the core values are reflected in the budgets as we move forward from year to year, in the school improvement plans, that we're, excuse me, really moving forward as a full community in support of what's in that document. Regarding getting people on board, I see that as part of the culture building that I feel will be happening around us all the time, every day. So, the shifting culture, the expectations of transparency that I will have, the strong communication, focus that I'll have, and really the inviting everybody to the table. I believe that those things will take the place of needing to get others on board. I believe that that part will happen naturally through the conversations and through the shift in culture.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Now over to Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question to you, Mrs. Gallivan, is how would you go about looking at a technology plan for our future, and who would you involve in that discussion?
Well, clearly Mr. Gray, but I know that you have I believe, a technology director for the city that oversees the networking for the schools.
Yep.
So I would, clearly start there as far as the beginning of the conversation, and primarily really to understand what our infrastructure is and what our capacity is now, and where he feels that we would, need to go to take it to the next level. But I also think that that's going to mean bringing building administrators and excuse me, teachers from the schools together on a team to say, what is it that either they need to do or need to be able to do, I guess, or want to be able to do. And if necessary, back those requests with, data needed to support what they're looking for. And then begin to put together a plan that will allow us to make it happen. But I would clearly rely heavily on the technology director. But I also would really focus on what I consider, one of the most important pieces of the technology is that instructional technology or the technology integration piece, as far as how do we teach teachers how to use technology better in their direct instruction. That's where we can truly enhance our core instruction. And from what I heard from my meetings, if I get her name right, when I met with administrators and teachers right now, is that would involve cloning, is it Dr. Brennan and Director Brennan?
Yep.
So from what I was told in my forums, that it would involve cloning her if we're gonna look to move forward with technology integration. But I would start there and involve, again, everybody that we need to make sure we can get it done correctly.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, next up, Ms. Spatafora.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is going to be budget focused. And in this difficult fiscal climate, what process would you use to determine budgetary priorities? And what are some of your priorities in a school budget?
So in this difficult time is the real segue in there. So, I mean, clearly it would start with meeting with Ms. Martz and really, I think I said it in an earlier forum or interview that would be the work that I would need to do prior to coming in. That would be my pre-study work, where I really need to dig deep into the budget and get to understand where everything is in the budget. It sounds like the budget process and the development in Malden has really come a long way over the last 8 to 10 years. And so I don't think that there'd be any need for zero budgeting or anything like that at this time. I think you guys sound like you have a really great handle on it, but I would need to do some real studying to better understand and ask the tough questions. Well, what I've been involved in at this point with looking at the budgets, again, I know I've said some of you have heard it, so I apologize, but I really stay true to that quote, show me your budget and I'll show you your values. I think it says everything about a school district and the commitment that a community is willing to make in this fiscal climate. Clearly, I would hope that our values right now are all about focusing first and foremost on the care and safety, both physically, but more importantly, regarding social, emotional well-being and support for our students and our staff and those in our school community when we return moving forward. Beyond that, from year to year, like I said earlier, the budgetary priorities need to be tied directly to the strategic plan. The district spending should be tied to our priorities outlined in the plan. Each of the school improvement plans need to be able to show how the initiatives that are going to happen or they want to happen in their buildings are then tied to the greater plan of the district. And all funding needs to be tied to the plan that's based on our community agreed upon core values. You went through this process that really identified a large group of people to make sure that all those stakeholders were at the table, and nobody should be dictating differently after that work was done. So that means that everything that we do now needs to be tied right back to that document. And if there are changes, obviously, we create strategic plans like they're living, breathing documents. If there's something needs to change because it's not working or because something in the community has changed, we need to be prepared to do that, but we need to bring those same stakeholders back to the table.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let's go up top to Mr. Iavino.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Laurie, as a question, is a kind of a follow-up to what you had said. As a result of the pandemic and the number of days that our students have been in remote learning, there are going to be significant gaps in student achievement. What specific measures will you undertake as a superintendent to assess those gaps and address that issue? And try to be as specific as possible, please.
Okay. I believe, the work has got to start by working closely with Dr. Chase and Mrs. McDonald and the full administrative team in order to determine, what tools do we currently have at our disposal to measure both the academic and the social emotional needs of our students at the various grade levels. We would need to work with teams of teachers to determine whether these tools are sufficient or whether we need to acquire additional resources. One tool that we need to use regarding the social emotional needs of students is to communicate with the families, for sure. Clearly, they're the ones who have the expertise on how their students are handling remote learning right now, and see what they see as the greatest need for their child or their children. I think after that, I think once we identify what we're going to use for tools, we need to put a plan in place to make sure that there are benchmarks and that there's appropriate criteria that will outline the expected skills at each grade level, as well as the next steps to target the students who are not sufficiently meeting those benchmarks, or enhancements that we can put in place for the students who are assessing at or above grade level. And I think one of the biggest things that I heard coming out of a lot of the conversations during the forums was that, the most important piece here is that these will need to be done. They'll need to be grade level assessments that are done district wide. It can't be everybody's doing their own thing. We need to assess all third graders across the district the same way, all fourth graders, all eighth graders, but we need to have everybody at the table to decide what's the tool we need to use and how we're going to get there. And we need to also be able to identify, quite possibly, what are some of the funds that we're going to use if we have to purchase a different tool. I would think that there most probably will be ESSER funds available to make sure that we have the tools, we have the right people, and that we have the criteria or outcomes that we're going to be able to put the plan in place going forward, which probably, like if it's anything like what we're starting to look at, is going to mean some academies over April vacation, some before and after school programming when possible, some much more in-depth summer programming. And we need the teachers involved in that. They're the ones who know, and are going to be able to identify where these gaps are and what we need to do to tackle them.
Thank you.
Over to Mr. Weldy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question is about instruction, and it's a two-parter, but could you describe some ways in which you have been an instructional leader in your role or previous roles, and share an initiative that you were responsible for implementing that significantly changed teacher practice or student outcomes?
Okay, well, I mean, I don't want to sound the wrong way, but I feel that I personify instructional leadership every day when I walk into the building. That's what I'm there for. I spend my days working with principals and teachers to support best practices or find ways that I can support them in their delivery of best practices. Unfortunately, one of the things that's coming to mind is, this year kind of got tabled because of COVID and the pandemic. But when I first got to Winthrop, I instituted a weekly walkthrough program where myself and the special education director would weekly go into each of the buildings, and we would conduct walkthroughs with either building principal if they're available, if they weren't, one of their other administrative staff, an assistant principal or a special ed administrator in each of the buildings. And we would conduct walkthroughs, and these were always non-evaluative, nothing like that, nothing that we were looking for in that mode. But then after each session, we debrief, and we would use the time to help the building administrators to strengthen their ability to identify the classroom needs as well as the strengths that they were seeing. And by working with the principals, I felt like, I feel like I'm enhancing their ability to influence daily teacher preparation and daily instruction by having these conversations about what we're seeing on a regular basis, what we're noticing. And I would consider that an initiative. I guess one of the other things that I really was instrumental in Winthrop is bringing a nationally recognized student assessment program to the district in grades K to 8. I worked with a team of educators, administrators, and specialists for a year to study the different analytic platforms that were available. And I've continued to meet with these same folks to expand the program each year to produce greater opportunities for increased student outcomes. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit right during the time that would have been our focused kind of data points. While we're not able to see the growth at this time that we would have hoped to be looking for, we're quickly identifying the learning gaps and the targeted interventions that are going to be necessary. So I also fully believe that we'll see stronger student outcomes in the future due to the addition of this program and due to the additional components of the program that we keep adding from year to year. So I think those would be two initiatives I would say target both student growth and teacher growth.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Up next, Mr. Gray.
Okay, now that I'm off mute. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Gallivan. Communication skills are instrumental to any leadership role and carry two key components: being a good listener, as well as being a strong communicator. As superintendent, your communication varies with different groups of people groups of different people, like city leaders, school committee members, staff, and parents, and even students. Our question for you tonight is, how accessible will you be to these individuals, welcoming their ideas, thoughts, and concerns?
So, I mean, that's a great question. I appreciate it. I will be extremely accessible. I don't know how to say it more than that, except that, as I laid out in some of my plans in my earlier interviews and during some of the forums, I'll be looking for opportunities to go out into the community, to meet with different groups. I'll also be looking for assistance in identifying some of these groups that may want to partner with the district or simply just become more informed about the schools and more informed about our students and what they're doing and what they're learning, and how I hope that they will then see a way that they might be able to partner with the schools when they start to hear about what's going on in the district. And communication is clearly going to look very different for all of them. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no trick here, right? I'm going to ask each group of the stakeholders what means of communication they prefer. I plan to establish quite a few different groups I've mentioned in some of the past meetings. So I plan to have a parent advisory committee with representation from each of the school buildings, representation from CPAC, representation from LPAC, and any others that someone might be able to share as good suggestions. I plan to have student advisory committees, both with high school level students and middle school level. I think that we need to hear a lot more from our middle school students if we want to continue to build a program of studies that's going to work for our high school students. And I would work with the building administrators to determine how the representatives from those groups would become part of the committee. I would hold community coffees, and I would hope maybe others in the community might host some for me to drop in on theirs. Love to be able to speak with the Chamber of Commerce and Rotary and any other organizations in Malden that, again, would invite me in. I'm happy to go anywhere they'll have me. And, I plan on having bi-weekly meetings with the union president and monthly meetings with the full e-board. I don't think you should be waiting till 3 weeks before negotiations to invite the rest of the group to the table. You need to have ongoing conversations so that we don't have issues come up when it's time for negotiations, right? Everybody knows what's going on and everybody's been a part of the conversation the whole time. So I would plan on doing those. I would plan on continuing what I started in Winthrop with the bi-weekly walkthroughs with the building principals. I say bi-weekly in Malden only because there's quite a few more schools. And if the student advisory committee decides that they'd like me to use Twitter as a means of communication, then I will use Twitter. And if the parent advisory committee would prefer that I give them regular Connect Ed calls and a weekly memo, then that's how they'll receive their updates. So I think communication is only as good as it is being received on the other end. So if they want it this way, that's how I will deliver it. And if people want it in multiple ways, I would be happy to do that as well. I really think that's something we have to ask the different stakeholders. How do you want me to deliver this information to you on a regular basis? And I will be happy to deliver it in the means that they feel best works for them.
Thank you, Ms. Gallivan.
Okay, from Ms. Luong, what experience do you have working with students with varied abilities, and specifically what checks and balances will you put in place to ensure that special education, ELL, and all students who need services are receiving them appropriately?
So So as I explained earlier, during my time in Newburyport, we went through a full inclusion transition with a lot of training and 4 years of really great work. And it was amazing to me to see the growth in our students. So I think that that's really an important part of my history that I take with me, as well as the fact that I have been the ELL director in both Saugus and Winthrop for the last 7 years. So I've, worked with Ms. Adara for quite a few years through the 5 district partnership as well as ELL. And so I think I have a good understanding of, keeping the focus on what every student needs. It doesn't matter whether they're ELL or special ed, but as an individual child, what they need is what we have to keep in the forefront. And I think that it starts with strong tiered systems of support, focusing on the student and not the documents that have identified some of the students as needing some additional support, but the students themselves. And I also believe that, we need to make sure that we're continually offering teachers the type of professional development that they need and that they're asking for, not necessarily always what we think they need, but what they tell us they need, because that will better equip them to support a variety of students. And, we need to support them to do what we're asking them to do. And we have to listen to them. So that was also another, I would definitely work with Dr. Chase and the union to put together a professional development committee as well. I don't think that the decisions around professional development should be made in isolation by administrators. I think we should have teacher voices at the table to discuss that. In regard to making sure all students are getting what they want, what they need, I think that a real big piece will be working with Ms. McDonald. I think the superintendent and the director of special services really need to work together very closely to make sure that we are delivering on what we promise, right? So that would be definitely top of my list, is to get a better understanding, work with CPAC, understand from CPAC and LPAC parents what it is that are their struggles, and how do we as a district trying to mitigate some of those struggles for the parents so that we can focus on the instruction of the students.
All right, very good. And finally, Mr. Froyle. Mr. Froyle, you're on mute, Mr. Froyle. Mr. Froyle?
I hear you.
There you go. Yep, you're good.
Ms. Gallivan, Malden High School is a comprehensive high school. If money were available, would you consider adding a few more technology education shops to make it a truly comprehensive high school? What experience do you have working with vocational, college, and career pathways?
So, absolutely, I believe that any type of CTE education for students is really worth digging into and investing in, if possible, if the money is there. It's a large commitment. It's a large commitment by a community, not just a district. Getting past Chapter 74 and what we can and can't do in some of the public school arenas. But as far as experience with vocational, when I was a teacher at the alternative in high school in Lynn, our students in Lynn had vocational skills courses like culinary and carpentry and plumbing in their course requirements. So I do have some familiarity there. And that really helped me to gain, insight and value, understand the value, I guess, in those opportunities for a lot of our students, especially our alternative high school students. Regarding college and career pathways, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Most districts have been exploring the early college pathway as well as the innovation pathways through the Department of Education. Dual enrollment, I'm fairly certain, do you still have a program with Bunker Hill?
Yep.
So, I think any type of dual enrollment programs like that are great opportunities for students. And, I'm in full support of the college and career pathways. I would also love it, like I said, if I think I mentioned in earlier ones, but I would love to see if we could bring in some type of certification courses, CNA licenses for certified nursing assistants, maybe EMT programs for emergency medical technicians, for students who might be looking to go out into the workforce right from, high school and have a leg up, not have to start fresh coming right out. I'm also a big proponent of looking at other opportunities from gap years for students. So any type of programming that we can put in place that we can give students, that little jump, that little head start when they're leaving high school, I think is worth investigating and worth putting a team together and really doing well. So I'm absolutely on board with investigating any prospect of bringing additional opportunities and programs to Malden students.
Thank you.
All right, that does it for the formal questioning. Now let's open it up to members to see if they need anything clarified or if they have any additional questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Let's go to Mr. Iavino.
Thank you, sir. Laurie, in reading over your resume and the section on leadership and management skills, you speak about 2 situations that you characterize as crisis situations. I was wondering if you could clarify that, tell us something about either or both of those situations.
Sure. So the first one was during my time in Newburyport. I don't know if any of you remember 2009, there was a report of an armed gunman moving towards the Knock Middle School and Mullen Elementary School complex. And at the time, I was the assistant principal at the Knock Middle School, but I was acting principal for the day at the upper elementary because the principal there was out. And the superintendent at the time, Dr. Kevin Lyons, came in and he said, I need you to stay by me. You're my shoulder, you're my ears. It was full involvement, state police. We were told to go out to the playground because it was dismissal time. We brought all parents in, including furry little dogs, put them in different classrooms with our lockdown procedures. In hindsight, wrong move. State police flooded everybody into our library at the time. It was one of the first incidents, I believe, in the area that, that ended up in a multi-district, multi-town event. And, but they brought everybody in. And afterwards we said, well, the gunman could have walked right through the door with everybody else. Nobody checked anybody. The state police just said, all you parents, because the parents started running forward. My kids are in this building, what's going on? Short and long, it ended up being someone evidently known to the police that had something to do with the sanitation department in Newburyport. And they were able to nip the situation in the bud. He did have some type of weapon. He was not moving towards the schools. But there was a report during it that somebody from one of our schools, where the principal was in the building that I was in. So all the principals were there for a meeting with the nurses. And the superintendent, when he had me by his side, he was saying, where is Christina, the principal? Why can't I get her? And I said, because she's in the nurse's office. So I had to connect with another teacher and get him on the phone with somebody in the building because somebody reported that there was a gunman in the school, and the SWAT team actually kicked in the door to a 2nd grade classroom with cowering children. So it wasn't just the crisis situation itself, it was the repair that we had to do afterwards. And it was the teams of safety and policy that came out of that incident that was really the learning event for me. And the other was, I don't know if you remember, May of 2011, when there were, right at entrance time in Saugus, there were 2 bodies found behind the Lyndhurst Elementary School. So I was the principal of that school. So it was myself and the custodian who came upon the custodian first, and then myself and he who came on and had to kind of run roughshod really quick that morning because the district attorney, there was all kinds of other things going on, but the district attorney would not let us cancel school. He would not let us contact. So we had to let everybody come. And so we basically, big rolls of colored art paper. The custodian and I were covering wall to ceiling windows in our courtyard. We were closing blinds with duct tape. We were doing everything we could because we knew teachers and children were coming into this building, and we had to do everything we could to make sure that there was no way they got anywhere near catching a glimpse of what was out back, because we were not allowed to go near the scene, obviously. And that was a really trying time. It was really trying for my teachers. And the work, again, that we did, it's, I guess, unfortunately, it's made me much more proactive for crisis situations. But, you know, I feel like I gained a lot of perspective on how to handle things. I do not freak out. I am very calm in crisis situations. But I did learn a lot about the pre-planning that needs to be done, because again, you really never know what to expect. I never thought I was going to turn up in school one day and that would be how my morning would start.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Mrs. Spatafor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is going to be centered around out-of-district placements. And so our current numbers in Malden, we're currently servicing 84 students out of district. What are your thoughts on, or plan to be able to bring students that could possibly, I'm not saying all students can be serviced in district, but creating a program within the district that allows us to bring those services to those students so they're able to be educated with their peers?
So, I mean, obviously it would be a deep dive into who these students are that are out of district right now, what their service need is. You know, I think that this is where the superintendent needs to really work closely with Assistant Superintendent of Student Services to review the current programs. You know, in Saugus, the special education director and I worked really closely together. And years ago, we were able to do just this. We were able to look at a group of students who, at the time, it was our ASD program, and we had a lot of students and parents that had similar needs and that were looking for out-of-district services. And we had to look outside and say, who can we partner with? You know, who can we bring in to keep some of the students in district right now, but who can teach us and train us? Because what happened was we had a group of parents that were already out. And so what we did was we brought the New England Center for Children in. We used their ACE curriculum. We elevated a group of paraprofessionals that had to have additional training, and were all trained in the ACE curriculum as well. And you know, you look at places like Melmark and May Center who are using New England Center for Children's ACE curriculum. And we basically had to build a program where we paid for one of their employees to be the lead teacher in the program. We had our own employees and our own paraprofessionals that learned side by side. I believe it was a 3-year contract. And then we brought the parents whose students were out of district at Melmark, at May Center, at these different places. We brought them back in to do an evaluation of our program so that they could see for themselves, you know, do we have what, you know, can my child come back and get what they're getting now without having to put them on a bus, without having to put a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old who's nonverbal on a van with an outside vendor, you know, and just the angst that goes along with that is something we never want parents to have to go through if we can find a way to rectify that. So I think the big piece is finding the group of students that we could target. You know, maybe there's 2 different groups. I'd have to look closely and talk closely with Assistant Superintendent McDonald, and dig deep. What can we build? Who can we partner with? And if this is what we're, you know, this is truly one of our core values, make sure the money's in the budget and that it's designed to be able to do this over a prolonged period of time. But the one thing we always have to remember when you build something like that is you can't just build it and let it go, right? So if we were to build it for elementary kids, we need to make sure we're training the rest of the staff, we're developing it to go to the next level so that when they're ready to move to, you know, if you start it in a say a 1st through 5th grade program, and that there's something to be ready to move when there's a group of kids that need to be in that 4th through 7th window. And again, in that 8 through 10 window kind of thing. So it's making a commitment. It's really, finding what you can do, making the commitment and backing it up with your budget, clearly, and making sure that, we're digging in deeper. I think it's also something that we should be looking at for any life skills programming. A lot of kids in life skills programming, they get ready to graduate and turn 22, and they get one evaluation or 1 or 2 days where somebody from Project Triangle or somebody comes in to do an evaluation or review, and they don't get to see what the children can do. They don't get to see what these people can do. They don't know that they can go out in the career and they can work, because it's a 1 or 2 day snapshot. So we need to build programs or bring Project Triangle in. Start to build the portfolios for our students in our life skills programs at an early age so that growth can be seen, videotape of different actions, get them out in the community, make sure that they're getting that experience and that they have a portfolio, which is their resume for when they graduate, to be able to move into some of these career programs versus sometimes having to go to a day program because there just isn't enough information to talk about who this student is. A lot of work, but well worth it.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, can I just counter on that really quickly?
Please.
Can you, just a very quick question, elaborate on the amount of students that you were actually able to bring back into the district when this program was established?
I believe in total it was 7 at that grade level, in that grouping. I want to say that there were 4 in district, and we were able to bring back 3 within the first few years. I don't know whether after I left, whether that's continued or not, so I can't speak to it. But again, I mean, it's really about looking at what we can do. And like I said, trying to really figure out where if this is one of our core values, we need to figure out how to make it happen. There's no, we can't do it. It's a core value. It's been determined. Everyone agrees. How do we make it happen?
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. If I might, from the chair, we look to our superintendent for advice and guidance. So if you were superintendent, what would be your advice to us relative to the most recent DESE ruling that it's time to get back to in-person learning? Now, I know the circumstances of each district are different, but generally speaking, do you think the time has come?
I do. I think I wish that they had moved swifter, both the commissioner and the governor, on making sure that teachers were on that vaccination list early, because I do not think this would be as much of a difficult decision for so many districts had that happened. But I do think it's time. I do think that they need to have a little more understanding about some of the waivers and some of the concerns that people are going to have about space restrictions and how difficult it's going to be when, 150 districts are trying to buy 1,050 desks. I mean, really, where are they going to come from? How are we going to all do that at the same time? So I do think that there needs to be a little more wiggle room on waivers. Now, with our conversation with them today, doesn't sound like that's going to happen, but I do think we can make it work. But I do think, like everything else we've talked about, everybody's got to be at the table. Everybody's got to be able to be heard. Doesn't mean that we can make everybody feel 100% right now, but people need to be heard, and they need to know that we're thinking about each other. We're not just making decisions in silos, right? We're bringing everybody there so that we can hear what's happening and why this is necessary.
Appreciate your candor. Any other questions? Let's see, Mr. Weldy, let's go to Adam.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Really briefly, just thinking about Ms. Spatafora's question about the out-of-district placements, and you had sort of mentioned going through a cycle in Saugus, I think, of working with the special ed director. And I guess my question is sort of parallel to hers, which is, have you seen yourself, or have you done that with in-district programming as well? Like the reviewing of the 504s, the IEPs, the different modes and models that are offered in your sort of assistant superintendent roles?
Yeah, so, well, in this role, I do all of the coordinated program reviews that DESE puts us through. I do the multi-tiered tiered focus instruction for ELL. So I get to do that work on a kind of every few year basis because I'm required to do it for DESE. So I'm required to go through and make sure that all of our ELL programming is in line, that our paperwork is up to date, that our folders and our information on all of our ELL students and our home language surveys and our translation services are all up to date and meeting with what the expectations are. And the same with 504 and curriculum around the coordinated program review. So in my role, I get to do that. And it involves different levels and different layers of teachers and administrators at all the different levels as well. So I do get to do that. I've never had a separate, auditing document that I've used in the districts. But I think because I'm always involved in that process, I never felt like I really needed it. Maybe it would be something I would need in Malden, not having had that involvement to this date. But I do believe that in what I've learned from speaking with the different groups, that you have a really dedicated administrative team who's really ready to do the work that's being asked of them. And I think we'd be able to put things in place to help the community and the committee feel like we are checking and balancing these things on a regular basis.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Weldy. Anybody else before we turn it over to the final comments? Seeing none, we're going to let you close us out. Are there any final remarks you'd like to make?
Sure. So, I mean, again, I want to thank everybody for the wonderful opportunity. I have really enjoyed getting to know Malden better. I said again earlier before, and I keep apologizing to Ms. Spatafora and Mr. Weldy because they hear me every time. But the things that the community of Malden has been doing, working on developing the area by the river, working on putting in new fields, bringing playgrounds up to the ability, being able to be accessed by all abilities, and making safe areas for the students in Malden shows me that the community is really committed to building a better future for its children. And to me, that translates as supporting their schools. And I know that I can make a difference in Malden. I believe that public education should meet the needs of all of our students. I know that we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we're delivering on that promise. And I truly believe that the culture of a school district and a community is the most important factor in student achievement. And I feel that I'm ready to do the work. I'm ready to be a part of a team that's willing to roll up their sleeves and make change happen for no other reason than it's the right thing to do for our students. And I will push administrators and teachers to think innovatively. I will push them to challenge the status quo and to fight for what they believe in. And as your superintendent, I would be asking them and all of you to do the same as me, do the same, to push me as your superintendent to do those same things. So I really thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that I'm hearing from you soon. So thank you.
Very good. All right, Mr. Weldy, Ms. Spatafora, where do we go next? So next is tomorrow night, we'll get back together. Mr. Weldy?
Mr. Weldy, do you want to?
Or
I was
Ms.
going
Spatafora?
to defer to Ms. Spatafora.
I was only shaking my hand because I actually had one last question for Ms. Gallivan. It's a very quick one, and it's actually not even related to superintendent, but she was talking so eloquently about Malden. I wanted to know, being part of the 5DP, knowing our area, what's your favorite place to eat in Malden?
Well, I haven't been in a while because I don't know if it's still there, but I used to love Serena.
Oh, yeah.
That was my favorite. Is it still open?
Yep.
I mean, that's one of my favorite places, but we haven't been out to eat in that area in the last year. So I was hoping that it's still open. But I love, you know, I love everything from the dock side to All Seasons Table. I can go anywhere in Malden because you can get anything you want to eat. It's so great. It has such variety. But, you know, what you were just saying, just to add about, you know, what I've learned and know about Malden. I grew up in Western Mass and I moved here 25 years ago and I made the North Shore my home and I never left. And I've stayed an educator on the North Shore because I really respect what communities here have been able to do. The work that we've been able to do as administrators and working with our legislatures, the legislative, you know, want to be involved with our districts. You know, as North Shore Superintendents Roundtable, we meet with them twice a year. They, you know, we have really tough conversations and they really want information on how can they help us move things forward. And that Student Opportunity Act work was led by our North Shore Superintendents Roundtable. So I just have such a passion for this area and the work that we do and the work that all of the superintendents and assistant superintendents and administrators in this area do. And I would love nothing more than to be a superintendent in Malden and continue to work on the North Shore. So thank you.
Thank you for that question, Chair.
Okay, so where do we go from here? Tomorrow night, you want the members back at 6, right?
6 p.m.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, and then we'll meet up Monday night
At 6
to start deliberations. Yep.
Yep.
All right, very good. Well, on behalf of the committee, thank you. Thank you for tuning in this evening and we'll see you again soon. Motion to adjourn by Mr. Iavino, seconded by Ms. Spatafora. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. School committee is hereby adjourned.